Okay, Algebra 1. So it is day 138. And what we're going to do today, so far we've solved by factors equal to 0. Now what we're going to do is do a new thing. We've used the square root property. Let's think it through. If squared equals 9, what is x? Okay, x is 3, we say. Well, what else could it? It could also be negative 3, because times a positive equals a positive, and so does a negative times a negative. So since squaring sometimes means by itself, the negative times the negative, any number squared will be 2 answers. Any number squared will be positive. Any number squared will be positive. Anything where whenever you take the square root, you'll have 2 answers. All right. When solving for x using the square root method, the answer is both the positive and the negative square root. If the number you are square rooting is not square, like the square root of 5, okay? If it's the square root of 5, then you have their answer is the positive negative square root of 5. So you must, and in which case you can use your calculator to get a decimal to get positive or negative. Okay, let's quit. Square root, we do the square root of 5, and we get 2.2. Okay, well, then that would be 2.2 and negative 2.2. So if the number you are square rooting is not a perfect square, either calculator, or there's another option. What if you have square root the positive and negative square root of 8? It's not a perfect square, but you can simplify it. Okay, you can simplify that to be 4 positive and negative. You simplify it, you find a factor that's itself a perfect square, and you get positive and negative 2. And I would want to get decimals. I would put that in my calculator as the square root of 8. Square root of 8, and I would get 2.8, and my answer would be positive and negative 2.8. All right, so let's do it. Only a variable is squared. All right, so let me tell you what this means. Only a variable is squared. Notice all questions have just x squared equals something, x squared equals something. Look on the back. On the back, not only the variable is squared, we have a binomial. The variable and something else is squared. All right, we solved this a little differently. That's what that means. All right, but when we have x squared equals 25, you have isolated. So now what you do is you take the square root of both sides. And so the square root of x squared is x. The square root of 25 is 2 answers, positive and negative 5. Okay, so that's our answer. How do we do this? We take the square root of both sides. The square root of x squared is x. 40. Now, this is not a perfect square, so I can either simplify, use my calculator, or simplify. And in this case, we need to simplify. 40 can factor into the square times the square root of 10. And that can be simplified. And remember, if I take the square root, I'm going to get positive and x equals positive and negative 2 radical 10. Because if it is a perfect square, then I can actually take it out of the perfect square, remember, and that's what I have as my answer. And let's say I needed a decimal value for whatever reason. Here's what I would do. The answer, the square root of 40, second square root of 40, that's going to be the decimal 6.32. The answers are positive 6.3 and negative 3. All right, x squared equals 10. Square both sides. X equals negative square root of 10. I can't simplify that. There are no factors of 10 that are themselves perfect squares, so I'm done. All right, I want you to turn off the video, try these 3 problems, and see how you do. Okay? Mr. Raymond will have your answers. All right, let's go to the other side. You're done. Now, here's where we have a little more complicated problem. So what we do the same process. In order to get rid of this line, we have to take the square root of both sides. So when that happens, just like before, these 2 cancel each other out. Just like when we took square root of x squared, the 2 and the square canceled, leaving me with x, right? The same thing happens here. Those cancel, and I'm left with x plus 2 left equals, now, positive and negative 6. So now it's a little bit tricky. We have two answers, and I still need to subtract 2 to isolate or solve for x. Solving for x means getting x by itself. So I need to subtract 2. And the way I do this is I write the problem as x plus 2 equals 6 and negative 6. You know, I'm thinking ahead of myself. Sorry. I'm writing one thing and saying another. 6 and negative 6. And what I still have to do is I have to subtract 2 from this side so that they cancel and I get x by itself. So if I subtract x from this side, I must subtract x from both answers. So x is equal to two things, 6 minus 2, which is 4, and x also equals negative 6 and negative 2, which is negative 8. So it's going to have solved it, and you have two answers. You have two answers because it's x squared. Let's do the next one. I have a square root. I'm going to take this of both sides, leaving me x minus 1 on the left equals the positive and negative square root of 20. All right, well, a couple things. We have to simplify that. So let's leave this alone. X minus 1 equals positive and negative. Break that up. Pull out a radical 4. I can into 4 and 5. This is a perfect square. So I still working it. X minus equals positive and negative. I can take that, get 2 radical 5. I cannot simplify anymore. But I still have to get rid of this negative 1. So what I do is I write x minus 1 equals positive 2 radical 5 and negative 2 radical 5. And what I do is I add 1 to this side so that will cancel, leaving me with x equals, I add 1 to that, add 1 to that. Now the temptation is to add 1, subtract 1, but it's just balancing the equation. If you add 1 to the left, you have to add the answers on the right. Now this is going to be, you can leave it like this or you can make it a decimal. And so what I'm going to do is do calculator one at a time. So watch this. It's going to be 2 square root of 5. They just punch it in like that, move it over. It's going to give you a decimal. Follow that 5.5. So x equals 5.5. 5.5. And x is this negative value. So I put in negative. Remember to use, when you're making something negative, use this negative sign. 2 radical 5 minus, plus 1. Plus 1. So now I have the negative plus the 1. 3.5. That equals negative 3.5. So 2 answers. And I knew I was going to get 2 answers because I have x squared. All right, last one. Do some on your own. So you take the square both sides. You get 2x plus 1. These cancel. Equals positive and negative. You can't take the square root of 5. Now, you look at this. You have to subtract the 1 and 2. So let's do them one at a time. All I can do is subtract negative 1. So what I get, 2x, these cancel, equals, let's write them separately. I'm going to write radical 5 and negative 5 minus 1. All right, I have 2 answers. I have to keep them. And what I have to get rid of this 2. And if I divide by 2 on the left, I need to divide on both of these. Okay? So this cancels. I'm left with equals 5 minus 1 over 2, and x equals negative minus 1 over 2. And this I plug into my calculator, okay? Let your calculator do the work, parentheses in. So here we go. Square root of 5, move it over, 5, move over out of the parentheses. If you don't move a key, then you're going to put the negative 1 under the parentheses. It's not what you want. Minus 1, see, there's the numerator, divided by 0.62, we'll call it. 0.62. Parentheses, square root of 5, move over, you've done with the square root of 5, this 1. Okay, get the positive and the negative, you've subtracted 1 from both, and now you divide by 2 to get 0.62. Negative 1.62. So these are my 2 answers. I knew. Okay? All right. So I want you to stop the tape, try these problems and then check your answers. I'll see you tomorrow.